Are you a dungeon master who is tired of always looking at stat blocks without really knowing anything about the creatures you're using in combat against your players? And do you want to go deeper into the lore of some of the abominations that really make Dungeons & Dragons such a classic game? Maybe you should look into Volo's Guide to Monsters. But before I do this, I want to really say thank you to each and every single one of my subscribers, because I am almost at my first 1000 subscribers thanks to you guys, and I've only been doing this for a few weeks. I'm really getting a lot of great support, so if you want to see me review more stuff, just hit the subscribe button, hit the like button and comment below. I think that these books, who serve as an add-on to the core rulebooks, are a little bit overpriced. I'm of course talking about Volo's Guide to Monsters, Xenetter's Guide to Everything, and of course the Sword Coast Adventurer's Guide. The quality of these books is very amazing. The only problem I have with it is that they are very, very thin. For example, the Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition Monsters Manual is about 350 pages thick, while this thing is only 225 pages thick, and it only costs a few dollars less. I think on Amazon right now the Monsters Manual is at $37 and this thing is at $32, so although this book is very good, I think it's a little bit overpriced. Well, there is a lot in here for the Dungeon Master to put against his party, and there's even a little bit in here that you can use as a player as well, although it's not a lot and not worth buying this book for. First of all, I have to say some of the lore in this book is amazing. So what is Volo's Guide to Monsters? Well, basically it's a guide to monsters. So if you are expecting a book full of a lot of new monsters, you are going to be a little bit disappointed, because that's not what this is about. This book really goes into some of the lore of some of the classic Dungeons & Dragons monsters. If you are a fan of such classics as Mind Flayers, Kobolds, Giants, and Beholders, you will get a lot out of this book. For me, there's basically two major parts to this book, and that's the first part is where they go into the lore of a lot of classic Dungeons & Dragons monsters. They really talk about why Kobolds are kobolds and why Mind Flayers keep mind flayering and Beholders keep beholding. Also, for each of these creatures, they really go into the lair, where they live, how they live, and why they live there, and also some of the minions they use in combat and out of combat. If you are a dungeon master that has a little bit of a burnout when it comes to making up new villains or encounters, reading the first part of this book, which is a very big part of the book, really can ignite some new ideas for your next or your current campaign. And while a lot of the monsters in the Monsters Manual have this little piece of text giving you some of the lore, Wizards of the Coast decided to pick out some of the classic Dungeons & Dragons monsters like Giants and just really focus on the lore of those creatures. So if you ever have a party that is crazy enough to attack a Mind Flayer colony, you've got a Mind Flayer colony now. Or a Goblinoid war camp. Or an Orc stronghold. And something I've used already before I had this book, but because one of my friends had this book, the 1T or 1T Temple. And of course, hags. The second big part of this book is of course also important, and that's a lot of new monsters. I think about 100 of them, if I'm correct. New monsters and old monsters that do new things, for example an orc that explodes when it stands near you. One thing to know when you use this book is what I think the most important part for using this book is that you not only use the stat blocks of these monsters, but also go into the lore of these monsters to see how exactly and when exactly they use some of their features, because a stat block is always very nice to use and it's all very much fun to swallow a creature. But in the first part of the book they explain a lot of the strategies and tactics used by, for example, kobolds. So for example, when using a Mind Flayer, please don't just put a Mind Flayer in front of your characters and use its stat block. No, really read up on the Mind Flayers, and especially on this Mind Flayer, because it is exactly this Mind Flayer they talk about earlier in the book. And then a very small part of the book, and that is why it's not a book worth to buy if you are only a player. So if you have a Dungeon Master with this book, call yourself lucky because you have some new playable races. Like for example the Simar, the Kenku, the Goliath, the Kobolds. There is even an Orc playable race in here. So there is a lot of new options for a player as well. It's just not enough to buy the book, but if somebody at your table has this book, it's very cool to use one of these creatures. But of course in your home campaign you do whatever the heck you want, or whatever the heck your Dungeon Master wants you to do. Also, if you want to turn your Dungeon Master into a crying little baby, you should make a Tabaxi monk. My girlfriend, for example, made a Tabaxi monk, and she's the fastest player character I've ever seen. And she can climb walls, trees, whatever. Aquaman. One very important thing I really noticed in this book is that there are a lot of creatures in here that are very, very unforgiving to the players. Because we all know that 5th edition is a little bit in favor of the players, especially the Monsters Manual is, and this really makes up for it. Something that always bothered me about the giants in the Monsters Manual is that they could just hit hard. And that's it. There was like one giant in there that had some other features, but for most of the giants they were just able to hit very hard. And of course they are giants, they can hit very hard. I really like that they put some giants in here that can do some very, very different stuff. And we all know how it ends when you start using petrification on your party. If you are playing Tomb of Annihilation and you want your party to really encounter some random dinosaurs, there's a lot in here that you can use. I mean, 2 pages. There is not a lot more to say about this book. If you are looking for a module that has a lot of great lore about some of the most classic Dungeons and Dragons monsters, if you are looking for more ways for your players, more playable races for your players, and if you are looking for a lot of new stat blocks in a book that is a little bit overpriced to my opinion, then the Volo's Guide to Monsters is really your cup of tea. I know I'm using this module a lot, and even in my next session, one of these creatures in here, one of these very unforgiving creatures in here, is going to be put against my level 8 party. So if you want to see one of my previous reviews, just click on one of the videos right here and also subscribe to my channel. It really helps me out, and I hope your inspiration will guide you.